At my son's birthday party, my daughter-in-law laughed and said maybe it was time I moved into a nursing home. She didn't whisper it. She said it while holding a champagne flute. She said it while everyone was watching my son blow out 40 candles. And some of them laughed. I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end of my story and tell me where you're watching from. I've learned that pain travels far, but dignity travels farther. The party was held at the Grand Willow Hotel downtown. Crystal chandeliers, white linen tablecloths, a live jazz trio playing softly near the bar. My daughter-in-law, Melissa, had made sure everything looked perfect. She always did. Appearances mattered to her. I arrived 20 minutes early. I always arrive early. Old habits from a lifetime of hosting Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas mornings. I wore a pale blue silk dress, knee-length, modest, pressed carefully that afternoon. My late husband used to say blue made my eyes look brighter. I still wear blue when something matters. I brought a gift for my son, a vintage wristwatch I'd kept in a velvet box for years. It had belonged to his father. I'd had it cleaned, the leather band replaced. It cost more than I should have spent, but some gifts are not about money. They are about memory. When I walked into the ballroom, I saw my son immediately. Daniel, tall, confident, laughing with his colleagues from the architecture firm. He looked successful, comfortable, surrounded. For a moment, I felt proud. Melissa swept over to me in a fitted black dress that probably cost more than my monthly utilities. She air-kissed my cheek. You made it, she said, as if I'd been questionable. Of course, I replied. Her eyes flicked briefly to the gift box in my hand. You didn't have to bring anything, she added quickly. At our age, we should be downsizing, not collecting more clutter. At our age. I am 72. She is 38. I smiled. I found my seat at table 7. Not at the family table near the stage. Not beside my son. Table 7 was near the back, close to the service door where waiters slipped in and out carrying trays of steak and salmon. I adjusted my napkin, smoothed the silk over my knees. I told myself it didn't matter. The speeches began after dinner. Daniel stood, thanked everyone for coming. He mentioned Melissa 3 times. He mentioned his business partners twice. He thanked family in general terms. He did not look at me. I told myself it didn't matter. Then Melissa took the microphone. She tapped the glass lightly, smiling in that polished way she has when she wants a room to bend toward her. Let's be honest, she began. 40 is a big milestone. It's when you start thinking about the future, about planning ahead. People chuckled politely. And speaking of planning ahead, she continued, glancing directly at me, maybe we should start planning for the older generation too. More laughter. I felt my shoulders straighten before I even realized I'd moved. She tilted her head slightly. I mean, Daniel, she said lightly, maybe it's time we look at some nice nursing homes for your mom. You know, somewhere comfortable, somewhere safe. The word safe landed like a suggestion I couldn't manage my own stove. A man at the next table laughed too loudly. Someone said, "Oh my God." Melissa lifted her hands as if she'd made an innocent joke. I'm just saying, she added. She shouldn't be alone in that big house forever. Daniel laughed. Not a forced laugh. A real one. Mom would probably hate that, he said. Probably. Not, my mother is perfectly capable. Not, that's not funny. Just probably. I could feel eyes on me now. Waiting. Measuring. Curious how the old woman would respond. I folded my hands on the table. I'm still very comfortable where I am, I said evenly. My voice did not shake. Melissa leaned closer to Daniel, stage whispering, but loud enough for 3 tables to hear. She's too independent for her own good. Too independent. As if it were a flaw. As if paying off a mortgage alone after your husband dies is reckless. As if handling your own taxes is suspicious. As if cooking your own meals is tragic. I felt something shift inside me, not anger. Not yet. Recognition. Because this wasn't the first time. Last Christmas, she'd suggested I simplify by selling the house. At Easter, she'd asked casually if I'd updated my will so things wouldn't get messy later. 2 months ago, she'd offered to help manage my finances. Each time, wrapped in concern. Each time, in public. And now, at my son's birthday party, under crystal lights and polite applause, she'd framed me as fragile, disposable, an obligation. The jazz trio started playing again, soft and indifferent. I picked up my water glass. Took a sip. Cold. Clear. Controlled. Daniel walked over a few minutes later, perhaps sensing something had shifted. Don't take her too seriously, Mom, he said quietly. She jokes. Of course, I replied. He looked relieved. Relieved that I hadn't made a scene. Relieved that I had protected the mood of his party. I handed him the velvet box. He opened it slowly. His smile faltered when he saw the watch. Dad's? He asked. Yes. He ran his thumb over the worn engraving on the back. For a second, just 1 second, his face softened. The little boy who once needed help tying his shoes flickered behind the man in the tailored suit. Melissa stepped beside him. Oh, that's lovely, she said. Vintage things are so charming. Charming. Not priceless. Not meaningful. Charming. She closed the box for him. You should keep it safe, she added. Things like that can get lost easily in older homes. Older homes. Older people. Older lives. I stood. I'm going to step outside for some air, I said. No one stopped me. In the hallway, the music was muffled, the carpet thick and patterned in gold vines. I walked slowly toward the exit, heels steady, back straight. I passed a mirror near the coat check. For a moment, I stopped. I did not see a frail woman. I saw a woman who had buried a husband, raised a son, paid off a 30-year mortgage, managed investments, hosted decades of family holidays. I saw a woman being repositioned, not by accident, by design. I adjusted the pearl necklace at my collarbone. Behind me, laughter spilled through the ballroom doors again. I smiled, not because it was funny, because something inside me had just become very clear. If they were planning my future, I would be the one who decided how that future looked. And tonight, they had given me exactly what I needed. Proof. I didn't go back inside right away. The night air outside the hotel was cool, almost sharp. Cars moved slowly along Main Street, headlights sliding across the pavement like quiet reminders that the world was still turning. Inside, my son's birthday party continued without me. Music, laughter, glasses clinking. Life goes on very easily when you are the one being repositioned. I stood near the valet stand and wrapped my shawl tighter around my shoulders. I replayed Melissa's words in my mind, not the joke itself, but the tone. Light, casual, public. It was never about concern. It was about planting an idea. Because humiliation in private is one thing, but humiliation in public? That's strategy. I went back inside after a few minutes. I wasn't going to be the dramatic mother who left in tears. That would have fit too neatly into her narrative. The ballroom felt louder when I returned. A few people glanced at me, then quickly looked away. No one mentioned the nursing home comment. That's how these things work. People witness something uncomfortable, then silently agree to pretend it didn't happen. I sat down again at table 7. My steak had gone cold. I cut a small piece anyway. Chewed slowly. Swallowed carefully. Melissa was laughing at the head table, one hand resting lightly on Daniel's arm. Possessive. Polished. In control. I watched her for the first time without filtering it through politeness. She wasn't worried about my safety. She was worried about my house. The house Daniel grew up in. The house that's fully paid off. The house sitting on almost half an acre in a neighborhood that has tripled in value over the last 10 years. 2 months ago, she'd asked how many bedrooms it had again. Last month, she'd asked if I'd ever considered something smaller. Tonight, she said nursing home. That's not escalation. That's progression. Daniel eventually returned to the stage for cake. Everyone gathered around. Someone dimmed the lights. Make a wish. Melissa called brightly. He closed his eyes. I wondered what he wished for. Success? Expansion? Another promotion? Or perhaps a future simplified of complications? Like an aging mother in a large house. When the candles were blown out, applause filled the room. Melissa hugged him first. Their friends surrounded them. Photos were taken. No one asked me to step closer. I didn't push my way in. I stayed where I was. Because sometimes the clearest position in a room is the one slightly removed from it. I left before the party ended. I didn't announce it. I simply picked up my purse and walked toward the exit. Melissa saw me near the door. Drive safe, she called sweetly. And think about what I said. I paused, turned slightly. Oh, I will, I said. And for the first time that evening, I meant it. I didn't cry on the drive home. I've learned that tears rarely solve what silence can. The streets were mostly empty by the time I reached my neighborhood. The porch lights along Maple Ridge Lane glowed softly, identical and steady. My house stood at the end of the cul-de-sac, just as it had for 36 years. 2 stories. White siding. Blue shutters Daniel helped me paint when he was 12. I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment. Melissa had said nursing home. But what she meant was removal. And Daniel had laughed. That part lingered longer than her words. Inside, the house felt exactly the way it always does at night. Quiet, orderly, patient. I hung my shawl on the same hook by the door. Set my purse on the entry table. Slipped off my heels. No chaos. No confusion. No signs of a woman incapable of living alone. I walked through the living room slowly, turning on one lamp. The soft yellow light touched the framed photos along the wall. Daniel at 5 years old, missing his front tooth. Daniel at 16, holding his driver's license. Daniel on his wedding day, standing beside Melissa in a white cathedral downtown. I paused at that photo. Melissa's smile had always been confident, even back then. But something about tonight connected pieces I had been ignoring. Last fall, she had asked if I'd considered putting the house into a trust to make things easier someday. In January, she'd offered to help me streamline my bank accounts. 3 weeks ago, she'd mentioned how difficult property taxes must be on a fixed income. And tonight, publicly, she'd suggested a nursing home. Patterns don't form overnight. They build quietly. I went into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. The clock above the stove read 11:47 p.m. I sat at the table where Daniel used to do homework. For the first time, I allowed myself to ask the question directly. Is this about care? Or is this about control? Because if I moved into a facility, the house would be sold. If the house were sold, the equity would be liquid. And liquid assets are easier to influence. Easier to help manage. I didn't feel fragile sitting there. I felt alert. There is a difference. My phone buzzed just after midnight. Hey, message from Melissa. Hope you got home safe. We should seriously talk about options soon. It's only responsible planning. Responsible planning. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I placed the phone face down on the table. This was no longer about embarrassment at a birthday party. This was about positioning. And something told me that if I didn't start paying attention now, decisions about my life would slowly be made without me. I finished my water, washed the glass, turned off the kitchen light. As I walked upstairs, I realized something simple but powerful. They thought tonight was a harmless joke. But jokes reveal intent. And now I knew exactly what I was looking at. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was hurt. Because I was remembering. Memory has a way of rearranging itself when something shifts. Details you once brushed aside start lining up in neat, uncomfortable rows. At 6:15 a.m., I was already in the kitchen making coffee. The same kitchen where Daniel learned to spell. The same counter where I filled out college financial aid forms after his father passed away. I paid for his tuition here. I refinanced this house to help him start his architecture firm. I co-signed his first business loan when no bank would trust a 24-year-old with big dreams. Melissa likes to say they built everything themselves. She wasn't there for the early years. She didn't see the late notices. She didn't see me sell my wedding jewelry after Harold's funeral to keep the mortgage current. She didn't see me sit at this exact table balancing checkbooks by hand because I refused to let this house slip away. This house is not a big place for one old woman. It is the result of decades of quiet endurance. I carried my coffee into the living room and sat in Harold's old armchair. The leather is worn on the right side where his elbow used to rest. I never replaced it. Daniel used to call this house home base. He brought friends here after Little League games. He brought Melissa here when they first started dating. She complimented the hardwood floors back then. Said she loved the classic feel. Classic. Not outdated. Not excessive. Classic. I remember the day we signed the final mortgage payment. Daniel was 32. We opened a bottle of inexpensive champagne in the kitchen. He hugged me and said, "Mom, this house will always be yours." Always. Funny how quickly always becomes negotiable. Melissa once joked that I was the family ATM. Everyone laughed. I laughed too. Because at the time, it felt like affection. Now I'm not so sure. I walked upstairs mid-morning and opened the hallway closet where I keep the file box labeled property and legal. Organized. Alphabetized. Updated every year. I've never been careless. The deed is in my name alone. Always has been. The will is clear. Everything split according to my instructions. No mention of management assistance. No automatic transfers. No clauses about relocation. I sat on the edge of my bed and held the folder in my lap. The nursing home comment wasn't about safety. It was about timing. And timing matters when property values are rising and development companies have started circling this neighborhood. Melissa follows real estate blogs. I've seen her browsing listings on her phone during dinner. I used to think she was just curious. Now I think she was calculating. I closed the folder gently. I'm not angry. Anger clouds judgment. What I feel is clarity. They think I am a sentimental woman clinging to old memories. They are wrong. I am a practical woman who understands assets. And if they are planning my future, they should understand something else. I am still the one holding the pen. 2 days after the party, Melissa called. Not Daniel. Melissa. Her voice was smooth, almost cheerful. I've been thinking about what we talked about, she said. We. Interesting choice of word. I don't remember agreeing to a conversation. I replied calmly. A small pause. Well, you know about planning ahead. Daniel worries about you being alone in that big house. Daniel worries. Or Melissa calculates. I've managed just fine for 10 years, I said. Since Harold passed. Another pause. Slightly longer. Yes, but things change, she continued. It's just responsible to explore options before something happens. Before something happens. There it was again. That quiet framing. As if danger were inevitable. As if I were already declining. I see, I said. She shifted tone, light again. We actually toured a beautiful assisted living community last month. Just to get an idea. It's really more like a resort. Last month. They toured somewhere last month. Before the birthday joke. Before the public suggestion. That wasn't spontaneous. That was groundwork. I wasn't aware I was part of that decision, I said. Oh, you weren't, she replied quickly. We were just being proactive. Proactive. I let silence stretch between us. People rush to fill silence when they're unsure. Sure enough, she added, it would free up a lot for you. Less stress. Less maintenance. And there it was. Free up. Not free up my time. Free up the house. I walked slowly toward the front window while she kept talking about amenities, gardens, social events, private dining rooms. I barely heard the details. Across the street, a for sale sign had appeared on the Miller property last week. Listed at $1.2 million. It sold in 4 days. This neighborhood is not sentimental. It is strategic. Melissa, I said gently, interrupting her. Have you and Daniel spoken to a real estate agent recently? Silence. Short. Tight. Why would you ask that? She said carefully. No reason, I replied. Just curious. I could almost hear her recalculating. No, she said finally. Of course not. Of course. When we ended the call, I didn't feel shaken. I felt confirmed. Because this wasn't about aging. This was about assets. And if they believed I would quietly transition from homeowner to dependent resident, they underestimated 2 things. My memory. And my patience. That afternoon, I drove downtown. Not to a nursing home. To my attorney's office. I didn't announce it. I didn't warn anyone. I simply parked, walked inside, and asked the receptionist for an appointment. Because if my future was being discussed without me, it was time I adjusted the terms. My attorney's office hasn't changed in 20 years. Same frosted glass door. Same brass nameplate. Same quiet carpet that absorbs the sound of your steps. I've always liked that about legal offices. Nothing echoes. Everything is deliberate. Mrs. Whitaker, the receptionist said warmly. It's been a while. It has, I replied. But I like to stay current. That was true. I don't visit lawyers because I'm in trouble. I visit because I prefer clarity. Mr. Callahan met me in his office 15 minutes later. Gray hair now. Thinner than before. Still observant. What can I help you with? He asked. I didn't dramatize. I didn't mention the birthday party. I simply said, I'd like to review my estate plan. And I'd like to discuss options for protecting my property from external influence. He didn't flinch. Attorneys rarely do. Is someone pressuring you? He asked calmly. No, I said. Not directly. That was the truth. Melissa hadn't demanded anything. She'd suggested. She'd planted. She'd toured. Which is often more dangerous. We went through my documents line by line. The house. Sole ownership. The savings accounts. Individual. The investment portfolio. Structured cleanly. Everything is in order, Mr. Callahan said. Unless you want changes. I do, I replied. I explained that I wanted a living trust established immediately. Not because I planned to move, but because I planned to control the narrative. The trust would specify conditions. Clear, firm, non-negotiable. No forced sale. No transfer of authority without documented medical evaluation from 2 independent physicians. No financial oversight granted through casual family assistance. He nodded. Preventive structuring, he said. Yes. We also added something else. A clause that if any immediate family member attempted to pressure, coerce, or misrepresent my mental capacity for personal gain, their inheritance would be significantly reduced. Legal language is cold, but it is powerful. By the time I left his office, the sun was lower in the sky. The air felt different. Not lighter. Stronger. I didn't feel like a victim walking out of that building. I felt positioned. On the drive home, my phone buzzed again. Daniel this time. Mom, Melissa said you seemed upset the other night. I kept my eyes on the road. I wasn't upset, I said evenly. She was just joking. I know. A pause. We just worry about you sometimes. I appreciate that, I replied. I had a productive afternoon today. Oh, he asked. Yes, I said. I reviewed my long-term plans. Silence on the other end. Not confusion. Concern. Plans, he repeated. Yes. I smiled slightly. Because for the first time since that birthday party, they were no longer the only ones planning. After my meeting with Mr. Callahan, I didn't rush. That's important. When you move too quickly, people sense it. They adjust. They counter. I made dinner that evening the way I always do. Grilled chicken, steamed green beans, brown rice. I set the table for one. No television. No background noise. Calm is a form of strategy. Daniel called again the next afternoon. Mom, he said, a little too casually. Melissa mentioned you went downtown yesterday. She's very observant, I replied. You met with someone? Yes. Another pause. With who? With my attorney. Silence. The kind that tightens. Why, he asked. Because I like to keep my affairs organized. You think we're disorganized? He said quickly. There it was. Defensive without accusation. I didn't say that. I let the silence stretch again. He exhaled softly. Melissa just wants to make sure you're taken care of. I am taken care of, I said evenly. By myself. That didn't land well. I don't understand why this feels tense, he added. We're just trying to plan ahead. So am I replied. Another pause. What does that mean? It means, I said carefully, that I've made some adjustments to ensure my wishes are respected. The air on the other end shifted. What kind of adjustments? The responsible kind. He didn't laugh this time. That evening, Melissa sent a text. Daniel says you changed something legally? That feels extreme. Extreme. Interesting word. Touring assisted living facilities without telling me wasn't extreme. Publicly suggesting I relocate wasn't extreme. But protecting my own property? That was. I responded with one sentence. It's simply good planning. No emojis. No explanation. An hour later, Daniel called again. Did we do something wrong? He asked. I didn't answer immediately. Sometimes people need to sit with their own question. You made a public joke about relocating me, I said calmly. Then you toured facilities without my knowledge. Then you discussed my property as if it were transitional. That's not fair, he said. Neither was the microphone. Silence. Heavy now? We were just thinking long term, he said quietly. So was I. And that was the truth. Because the dynamic had changed. Before they spoke. I absorbed. Before, they suggested. I smiled. But now there was structure, documentation, boundaries with legal weight, and something else. They were no longer entirely certain of their footing. You can hear it in someone's breathing when the power shifts. It becomes measured, careful. That night, I walked through my house again. Not to reminisce. To assess. The hardwood floors. The updated wiring. The new roof installed 3 years ago. The property survey folded neatly in my filing cabinet. This is not the home of a woman losing control. This is the home of a woman who understands value. And for the first time since that birthday party, they understood it too. The next week was quiet. Too quiet. No more casual jokes. No. More just thinking ahead. Melissa didn't call. Daniel kept his conversations short and careful. When people realize the ground isn't as soft as they assumed, they step lightly. I didn't confront them again. Instead, I observed. Observation is underrated. On Thursday afternoon, I received an email from Daniel. A forwarded message. No explanation. It was from a real estate agent. Subject line, preliminary property valuation, Maple Ridge Lane. My address. The email had been sent to Daniel 3 weeks earlier. 3 weeks before the birthday party. 3 weeks before the nursing home joke. The agent wrote, based on current market demand, the property could list between $1.25 million and $1.35 million. Quick sale likely due to developer interest. Developer interest. Daniel's short message above it read, "Mom, this came to me by mistake. Must have been an old inquiry. Nothing to worry about. Old inquiry. 3 weeks old." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I walked into my study and opened the drawer where I keep copies of everything. Yes, everything. Property tax statements, insurance renewals, HOA notices. And now, I printed that email. Paper has weight. Weight makes things real. I laid the printed email beside the trust draft Mr. Callahan had prepared. Timing matters. They toured assisted living last month. They requested a valuation 3 weeks ago. They joked publicly 5 days ago. This was not coincidence. This was sequence. That evening, Daniel called again. "Mom, I didn't want you to misunderstand that email." "I don't misunderstand," I said calmly. "It was just curiosity. People ask about property values all the time." "Of course," I replied, "especially when they're considering relocation plans." Silence. "You think we're trying to sell your house?" he asked. "I think you're thinking about it." "That's not fair." "Fairness ended at the microphone," I said quietly. His breathing changed again. He wasn't angry. He was unsettled. Melissa took the phone. "Mrs. Whitaker," she said smoothly. "We were only exploring options in case something happened." "What's something?" I asked. "Well, health changes. Emergencies." "Then perhaps," I said gently, "you should have included me in the exploration." Another silence. Shorter this time. Because they understood something now. I wasn't reacting emotionally. I was aligning facts. After we hung up, I placed the printed email in a folder labeled documentation. Not revenge. Documentation. Because here is what they didn't account for. I am not intimidated by paperwork. I am strengthened by it. The next morning, Mr. Callahan called to confirm the trust was finalized. Everything signed. Everything filed. Everything binding. And for the first time since that birthday party, I no longer felt like the subject of a conversation. I felt like the author of it. I invited them over the following Sunday. Not for confrontation. For dinner. Melissa sounded surprised when I called. "Oh," she said lightly. "That's nice." "Yes," I replied. "It's been a while." Daniel arrived first. He always does when he's uncertain. He hugged me a little tighter than usual. Not out of affection. Out of assessment. Melissa followed 5 minutes later, carrying a bottle of wine she didn't ask if I liked. We sat at the dining table where Daniel once did his math homework. I had prepared roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans with almonds. Simple food. Familiar food. No tension in my tone. No sharp edges in my voice. That unsettles people more than anger. Melissa complimented the house twice within the first 10 minutes. "It's still in such good shape," she said, looking around. "You've maintained it beautifully." Maintained. Not lived in. Maintained. Daniel cleared his throat. "Mom, we don't want things to feel weird." "They don't," I said. Melissa leaned forward slightly. "We just want to make sure you're safe long term." There it was again. Safe. "I appreciate that," I replied. "Which is why I've taken steps." Daniel exchanged a glance with her. "What kind of steps?" he asked carefully. I stood up, walked calmly into the study, returned with a slim folder. I placed it on the table between the plates. No dramatic gesture, just a quiet thud of paper on wood. "What's this?" Melissa asked. "My updated estate structure," I said. Daniel frowned slightly. "You changed the will?" "I refined it." Melissa's smile tightened. "In what way?" "In the way that ensures my assets remain under my authority unless 2 independent physicians certify I'm unable to manage them." Daniel blinked. "That's unnecessary. It's preventative." Melissa folded her hands. "We would never try to take control." "I know," I said gently. "Which means the clause should never concern you." Silence. I continued. "There is also a stipulation," I added, "that any attempt to pressure, misrepresent, or influence decisions regarding my residence will reduce inheritance allocation." Daniel's fork stopped midair. Melissa didn't blink. "That feels harsh," she said. "No," I replied calmly. "It feels clear." The room felt smaller now. Not tense. Defined. "You don't trust us?" Daniel asked quietly. "I trust behavior," I said. "Not suggestions made under chandeliers." Melissa's composure flickered for half a second. "Are you punishing us for a joke?" she asked. "No," I said. "I am responding to a pattern." No one raised their voice. No one stormed out. But something fundamental shifted. They had expected hesitation. They received documentation. Daniel leaned back slowly. "So the house isn't flexible?" he asked. "It is," I said. under my decision. Not theirs. Mine. Dinner continued after that. Polite. Controlled. Measured. But the tone had changed. They were no longer planning my relocation. They were recalculating their assumptions. And for the first time since that birthday party, I wasn't reacting. I was leading. They stayed for dessert. Apple pie. Vanilla ice cream. The same brand Daniel liked when he was 8. Normal details make difficult conversations harder to dismiss. Melissa was the first to speak again. So what happens now? She asked, folding her napkin carefully. Now. I repeated. Yes. With everything. I took a small sip of coffee before answering. Now nothing changes, I said. I remain in my home. I manage my finances. I continue living exactly as I have been. Daniel studied me. And if something happens, he pressed. If something happens, I replied calmly, qualified professionals will evaluate it. Not speculation. Not convenience. Melissa's jaw tightened slightly. We weren't speculating, she said. We were being realistic. I looked at her evenly. Realistic would have been speaking to me privately, I said. Not introducing relocation during a toast. Daniel flinched at that. It was the first visible reaction he'd had all evening. I didn't think it was that serious, he admitted quietly. That, I said, was the problem. Silence settled over the table. Not hostile. Final. I closed the folder and slid it back toward me. I need you both to understand something. I continued. I am not fragile. I am not confused. And I am not an obstacle to be managed. Melissa inhaled slowly, as if preparing a response. Then she stopped. Because there wasn't one that would hold. I built this life carefully, I said. Every decision was deliberate. That has not changed simply because I have more candles on a cake. Daniel looked down at his plate. Mom, we weren't trying to push you out. Intent is measured by action, I replied gently. You toured facilities. You requested property valuations. You joked publicly. That is a direction. Melissa's composure cracked for just a second. It was just information, she said. Information becomes strategy when repeated, I answered. The room felt still. Defined. Daniel leaned forward slightly. So what are you saying? He asked. I met his eyes. I am saying, I said clearly, that if I ever leave this house, it will be because I choose to. Not because I am maneuvered. No raised voice. No dramatic pause. Just truth. Melissa looked away first. Daniel nodded slowly. For the first time since his birthday party, he wasn't smiling. And for the first time since that microphone moment, they understood that the woman they were planning around was still entirely capable of planning for herself. They didn't leave immediately. That surprised me. Most people retreat when they realize the narrative has shifted. But Daniel stayed seated. Melissa sat very still, her posture perfect, hands folded in her lap. Controlled. Calculating. But no longer directing the room. Daniel finally spoke. Mom, why didn't you just tell us you felt that way? I didn't answer right away. Because this wasn't about feelings. You didn't ask, I said calmly. The truth doesn't need decoration. He nodded slowly. Melissa's voice was softer now. Less polished. We thought we were being proactive. Everyone we know is moving their parents closer. Downsizing. Consolidating assets. Assets. She caught herself after saying it. I didn't react. That may work for others, I replied. But I am not a project. Daniel rubbed his hands together. Something he used to do before taking a difficult exam. I guess I didn't think about how it sounded, he admitted. At the party. That was clear, I said. Not sharp. Just steady. He looked at me then. Really looked at me. Not as a responsibility. Not as a future plan. As his mother. I'm sorry, he said quietly. The word hung in the air. Melissa didn't echo it. But she didn't interrupt either. That told me enough. Apologies are not about volume. They are about awareness. I don't need promises, I said gently. I need respect. Daniel nodded. You have it. I held his gaze for a moment longer. Respect, I continued, means including me in conversations about my own life. Melissa shifted slightly. We never meant to exclude you, she said. But you did, I replied. No accusation. Just fact. The air in the dining room felt different now. Less defensive. More cautious. Daniel stood and walked toward the window, looking out at the backyard. The oak tree he climbed as a child still stood there, branches wide and steady. I forget sometimes, he said quietly, still facing the glass. You handled everything after Dad died. Alone. Yes, I said. I guess I started thinking of you as vulnerable. I am older, I replied. Not incapable. He turned back toward me, and something had shifted. Not dominance. Recognition. Melissa finally spoke again, her tone more measured than before. "We'll stop looking," she said. I believed her, not because she meant it emotionally, but because she understood the legal weight behind the folder I'd placed on the table. Boundaries backed by structure are rarely ignored. They left shortly after. Daniel hugged me again, this time without assessment. Melissa's hug was lighter. Careful. When the door closed behind them, the house felt quiet again. But not lonely. Grounded. Because this wasn't about winning. It was about restoring position. And in that dining room, beneath a simple light fixture and over apple pie, my place had been reestablished. Not as an aging complication, but as the woman who still holds authority over her own life. A week after that dinner, the house felt the same. Morning light still stretched across the hardwood floors around 7:10 a.m. The coffee maker still clicked twice before finishing its brew. The oak tree in the backyard still cast its wide shadow across the grass. Nothing dramatic had changed. And that was the point. Daniel called a few days later. Not to discuss facilities. Not to discuss property values. Just to ask if I wanted to come to lunch. We met at a small cafe near his office. No chandeliers. No microphone. No audience. He looked different without the crowd around him. Younger, almost. "I've been thinking," he said after we ordered, "about how I handled things." I let him speak. "When Dad died, you didn't fall apart," he continued. "You just handled everything. I think somewhere along the way I confused quiet strength with vulnerability. That's an easy mistake. The world often does. I don't need to be handled," I said gently. "I need to be heard." He nodded. "And you are," he said. Melissa didn't join us that day, but later that week, she sent a short message. "I realize we overstepped. I'm sorry for the way it came out. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't dramatic. It was measured, and that was enough. Because this was never about revenge. It was about correction." A few days after that, I walked through my home again. Not to assess. Not to defend. Just to live in it. I ran my hand along the banister Daniel once slid down when he thought I wasn't looking. I paused at the photo of Harold in the hallway. I opened the front door and let fresh air move through the entryway. This house is not just wood and drywall. It is proof. Proof that I survived loss. Proof that I built stability. Proof that I am still capable of choosing my own direction. The trust documents are filed. The clauses are clear. The boundaries are set. But more important than the paperwork is something quieter. Recognition. Daniel sees me differently now. Not as a future responsibility, but as the woman who made his present possible. And if one day I decide to downsize, if I choose a smaller place, or even a community with gardens and shared dinners, it will not be because I was maneuvered. It will be because I decided. That night at his birthday party, under crystal lights and soft jazz, I was briefly repositioned as a problem to solve. But here is what they forgot. I am not a loose end. I am the foundation. And foundations don't get relocated. They hold everything up. This house still stands. And so do I.